supervisor sent me a voicemail at 6:47 in the morning, 2 hours before my promotion ceremony was supposed to start, and the word she used was premature. Not congratulations. Not we need to talk. Premature. Like the past 4 years of my life were a false labor. Like everything I had built, every late night I had stayed, every project I had carried across the finish line, while she took the credit in Monday meetings. All of it added up to something that had arrived too soon. Something embarrassing. Something she needed to manage. I stood in my bathroom with the phone pressed to my ear, mascara wand in my other hand, and I listened to her voice tell me that the regional director had concerns, and that perhaps I should temper my expectations for the afternoon. Her tone was careful, almost gentle. The way you talk to someone you've already decided to disappoint. I set the mascara down on the sink. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Then I went to work anyway. I want to explain something about myself before I tell you what happened next. Because I think it matters. I am not, by nature, a fighter. I grew up in a house where you kept the peace. Where you smiled at the table even when things were breaking underneath it. My mother had a phrase she used whenever I got upset about something unfair. She would look at me with that particular tired patience of hers and say, "Pick your battles, sweetheart." I heard that so many times growing up that it became a reflex. Someone wrongs you? Breathe. Someone takes what's yours? Wait. Someone lies to your face and smiles while doing it? Pick your battle. Make sure it's worth it. The problem is that nobody ever taught me what to do when every single thing becomes a battle you've been told not to pick. I started at Harmon & Wells 4 years ago, straight out of my MBA program at the University of Michigan. I was 27. I was the youngest person in the commercial real estate division by almost a decade, and I was one of only 3 women. The other 2 were in administrative roles. I tell you that not to complain about it, I went in with my eyes open, but because it explains a lot about what came after. My supervisor's name was Diane. She had been with the company for 16 years. She had a corner office with a view of downtown Columbus and a collection of crystal awards on a shelf behind her desk that she referenced in every performance review. She was, by most measures, successful. She was also the kind of person who collected people the way some people collect those crystal awards, not because she valued them, but because having them made her look better. She collected me pretty quickly. Within 6 months of my start date, I was doing a significant portion of her client-facing work, preparing the analysis packages she presented to the regional board, running the numbers on the Whitfield portfolio acquisition, which ended up being one of the largest deals the Columbus office had closed in 3 years. I did not get credit for any of it. What I got was a good performance review and a compliment about my attention to detail that felt, even then, like something you say to someone you're planning to keep useful. I told myself it was normal. Junior employees pay dues. Everyone starts somewhere. I told myself that for about 2 years. The thing that changed wasn't one big moment. It was small. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and I was going through the expense reports from the Kellerman account because Diane had asked me to take a look before she submitted them. I had done this before. It was usually routine, but that Tuesday something didn't line up. A consulting fee. $4,200, paid to a vendor I didn't recognize, attached to a contract I couldn't find in our project management system. I flagged it in an email to Diane. I kept the tone neutral. Just wanted to double check on this line item before we submit. Want to make sure I'm not missing something on my end. Professional. Deferential. Pick your battles. She called me into her office within 20 minutes. She closed the door. She sat down across from me with her hands folded on the desk, and she explained, very calmly, that the consulting fee was legitimate and had been pre-approved by the regional director, and that I should trust the process and not raise questions about things I didn't fully understand. I nodded. I said, of course. I apologized for the confusion. But I made a copy of the report before I sent it on. I don't know exactly why I did that. Instinct, maybe. Or maybe 4 years of watching someone take credit for your work teaches you something about documentation without you even realizing it's happening. I saved the file to my personal drive. I didn't think about it much after that. I just filed it away the way you file away a feeling that something is wrong. not knowing yet what you're going to do with it. That was 18 months ago. In those 18 months, I found 3 more. Not large amounts, not individually. The kind of numbers that would be easy to overlook if you weren't looking. Consulting fees from vendors I couldn't verify. A travel reimbursement that didn't match any trip on the office calendar. A client entertainment charge on a weekend when I happened to know because I had been in the office. Diane was on a family vacation in Sedona. I saved all of them. I documented everything. I cross-referenced the dates. I built a folder on my personal drive that I labeled somewhat grimly Rainy Day. I still didn't know what I was going to do with it. I wasn't even sure it was what I thought it was. I told myself I was probably misunderstanding something. Pick your battles, trust the process. You don't fully understand, but I kept saving. The promotion was announced in January. Senior Associate, Commercial Acquisitions. A new title, a real salary bump, and most importantly, a direct reporting line to the regional director instead of through Diane. It had been in discussion since my last review. Diane had told me herself that she had championed me for it. I had thanked her. I had meant it, even. The ceremony, which at Harmon and Wells is more of a formal announcement luncheon than anything dramatic, but they call it a ceremony, was scheduled for the 3rd Thursday of March. My whole team knew. My mother had sent a card. My best friend from college had texted me at midnight to say she was proud of me. I had bought a new blazer. And then, at 6:47 in the morning, Diane called my voicemail and used the word premature. I found out the rest in pieces, the way you always find out the worst things. Not all at once, but in fragments that keep arriving after you think you already know. A colleague pulled me aside before the luncheon to tell me that Diane had gone to the regional director the previous afternoon, that she had told him there were concerns about my judgment, that she had suggested the promotion be deferred by a quarter. Just to be safe. Just to make sure I was truly ready. When I sat down at the luncheon and the regional director, a man named Frank who I had met exactly 4 times, announced that the promotion would be revisited in Q3, I smiled. I ate my salad. I made eye contact and nodded. I congratulated the colleague who received his promotion that same afternoon. I shook Frank's hand when it was over. I drove home. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 11 minutes. And then I opened my laptop. I thought about my mother's phrase, pick your battle. Make sure it's worth it. I had been patient for 4 years. I had documented quietly, kept my head down, trusted that doing the work would eventually speak for itself. And then someone had walked into my director's office the day before the thing I had earned and whispered concerns about her judgment. And just like that, the thing I had worked toward for 2 years was deferred, not denied. Deferred, which is somehow worse, because it means they still want to use you. They just don't want to have to acknowledge what you're worth while they do it. I opened the rainy day folder. I went through everything. Slowly. From the beginning. Then I called my cousin who works in corporate compliance consulting in Chicago. We talked for 2 hours. She did not tell me what to do. She asked me questions. She helped me understand what I was actually looking at. What I was looking at, she explained carefully, was potentially a violation of Harmon and Wells' internal expense policy at minimum, and depending on the vendor relationships, possibly something that touched on fiduciary responsibility to clients. The amounts were not enormous, but the pattern was deliberate, and the fact that I had documented the dates, the cross-references, the original reports, that made it something. "What do you want to happen?" my cousin asked me near the end of the call. I sat with that question for a long time. Here is what I did not want. I did not want to blow up my career. I did not want a legal battle. I did not want to become the cautionary tale that every woman in a male-dominated field gets warned about, the one who caused problems and was never quite trusted again. I had watched it happen to someone else 3 jobs ago, and I had never forgotten the way people talked about her afterward. Like the thing she had reported was less important than the fact that she'd reported it. But here is what I also did not want. I did not want Diane to continue doing this. Not to the next person. Not to whatever 27-year-old was going to come after me, sharp and hopeful and willing to work hard. and not understand yet that she was being positioned as a resource rather than a person. So I did not take the rainy day folder to Diane. I took it to Frank. Not all of it. Not immediately. I requested a private meeting with the regional director. I told his assistant it was regarding a compliance question I needed his guidance on. He saw me 2 days later, Friday afternoon, clearly expecting something administrative. I watched his expression shift when I set the printed summary on his desk, 12 pages organized by date, with the relevant policy sections highlighted in yellow, and said, "I want to give you the opportunity to handle this internally before I think about other options." He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked me if I had shared this with anyone else. I told him I had consulted with a compliance professional regarding the nature of the documentation and that I had not yet taken any formal steps. I told him I wasn't interested in destruction. I was interested in accountability and, candidly, in not having my career trajectory managed by someone who had a personal incentive to keep me in a useful but uncredited position. He looked at me for a moment in a way that was hard to read. Then he said, "That's a fair way to put it." The next 3 weeks were the most uncomfortable of my professional life. I went to work every day. I sat in my regular desk. I spoke to Diane normally, or as normally as I could, which meant I answered her questions and attended her meetings and did not let anything show on my face. The HR process that followed was not swift and it was not clean. There was an internal investigation. There were conversations I was not in the room for. There were days when I was absolutely certain I had made the wrong call, that I had misread the situation, that I was going to find myself out of a job with a reputation as a troublemaker and a rainy day folder full of misunderstandings. But I had 12 pages of documentation, organized by date, with the policy sections highlighted. Diane was placed on administrative leave 7 weeks after my meeting with Frank. The company's internal investigation confirmed 3 of the 4 expense irregularities I had documented. I don't know what happened with the 4th. I don't know what conversations happened above Frank's level or what agreements were reached. Corporate accountability is rarely as satisfying as the version of it you imagine when you're sitting in a parking garage at 5 p.m. on a Thursday, running on adrenaline and a wilting spring salad. What I do know is this: the promotion was not deferred to Q3. It was approved the same week Diane went on leave. Frank sent me an email on a Wednesday morning. No ceremony. No luncheon. No new blazer moment. That said the board had approved the senior associate title effective immediately, and that HR would be in touch regarding the compensation adjustment. He added a single line at the end. "Your documentation was thorough. That speaks well of your judgment." I read that line about 4 times. I called my cousin. I called my best friend. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while, which is not dignified, but is honest. My mother asked me later that week how work was going, and I told her it had been a difficult quarter, but things were looking up. I did not tell her about the folder. I did not tell her about the conversation with Frank, or the investigation, or the 7 weeks of walking into an office every morning and pretending my heart wasn't pounding. My mother is not wrong that some battles aren't worth picking. I just think she taught me the wrong half of the lesson. She taught me how to recognize a battle. She didn't teach me that when the right one comes, when it's actually worth it, you fight it with everything you have. Diane did not return to her position. I don't know where she is now, and I find that I don't think about it very much. What I think about instead is the woman who will sit at that desk next year, or the year after. The one who will notice something that doesn't add up, and look around for someone to tell her that her instincts are wrong, that she's not understanding correctly, that she should trust the process. I hope she has a rainy day folder. I hope she has a cousin who asks the right questions. And I hope, when the moment comes, when she's sitting in a parking garage or a bathroom or a kitchen floor, wondering whether any of it is worth it, I hope she remembers that documentation is not bitterness. It is not revenge. It is not even really about the person who wronged you. It is simply what it looks like when someone decides, finally, that their judgment is worth defending. Mine was, and I was right. I still think about that folder sometimes. 12 pages. Organized by date. Yellow highlighter on every policy section that mattered. It wasn't dramatic till scat. Just paper. Just numbers. Just a quiet record of things that had actually happened. But sitting on Frank's desk, it was the most powerful thing I had ever put into a room. People talk about integrity like it's something you perform when others are watching. Like it's a reputation you manage, a quality you advertise. I used to think about it that way too, a little. But what I learned in those 4 years, what Diane taught me without meaning to, is that integrity is mostly what you do when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. It's saving the file when you don't know yet if it matters. It's flagging the discrepancy even when you're pretty sure you'll be told you're wrong. It's keeping the folder even when your instinct is telling you to just let it go and keep your head down. That's not heroism. That's just honesty maintained over time. And I think that's actually harder, because heroism is a moment. Honesty over time is a choice you have to keep making over and over when it costs you something each time. The intelligence piece, and I don't mean intelligence like a test score. I mean the kind that actually helps you survive, that came from learning to pay attention, not to the obvious things, to the things that didn't quite fit. The vendor I couldn't find, the reimbursement that didn't match the calendar, small details that most people would have scrolled past because they weren't looking for anything and didn't want the trouble of finding it. I was looking, not because I was suspicious by nature, but because 4 years of doing work that someone else signed their name to had made me careful. It had made me understand that the only record of what you actually did, sometimes, is the one you keep yourself. And then there is the part that I think gets talked about the least, which is just staying. Walking into that office every morning for 7 weeks while an investigation was happening somewhere above my head, and sitting at my desk and doing my job, and not letting anything show, that was the part that cost me the most. Not the decision to go to Frank that once I made it felt almost calm. The hard part was every single ordinary Tuesday afterward. Keeping your nerve when nothing has resolved yet. When you don't know how it ends, when you're still in the middle of it and there's nothing to do but keep going. I earned that promotion. I knew I had earned it before anyone else confirmed it, and I think that matters. Not because external validation is meaningless, but because you can't rely on it to be the thing that holds you together in the middle. You have to already know. You have to have done the work honestly enough that you can look at it clearly and say, yes, this was real. This was mine. Diane is gone. I have a new title and a direct line to the regional director and a blazer I eventually wore to a different kind of celebration. And somewhere, I hope, the next version of me is sitting at a desk, noticing something that doesn't add up, and deciding, quietly, without any guarantee, to write it down.